This week I want to talk about escapism and how the hyperreal destroys human growth. I believe that we live in an era that creates or brings out an increasing number of dysfunctional human beings. Dysfunctional human beings in the sense of increasing number of mental disorders, physical disorders. I tapped into this in, I think, one of my last videos. Maybe I link it. I'm not sure if I know how to do this, but then you can go and watch that video there. So a lot of chronic stress, social isolation, the whole nine. Okay, so we talked about this. On the other hand, and when I say that, I don't mean to put those human beings down. Of course, they have equal value, so that's not my intention, but objectively dysfunctional, just to be clear. And on the other hand, then of course, there's that desire for function. There's a desire for integration. There's a deep longing within each human being to be human and to connect to other human beings, and for wholeness and connection and just a happy life, so to say. So we have that collision that takes place between a lack and a demand or desire on the other side. And that collision gets kind of emphasized through an increasing lack of resources and tools to make those two poles meet or to balance them out, so to say. Because, on the one hand, you see there's a lot of capital floating around and you have people with everything, and you see that picture perfect life on social media and everywhere, but then the reality on the ground looks very different, that people struggle to pay their rent, to find jobs. If you look, I'm not talking about third world countries, you just have to look at the south of Europe, Italy, Portugal, with skyrocketing numbers of unemployment among young population. It's the same in the US, and so on and so on. So that's what I mean by this collision. So you have that clash, and you have seemingly no cure for this. And what you do if you seemingly don't have any cure, meaning you try your best, you try for months and years, and you just can't see anywhere to go, you engage in something called escapism. You just try to escape that situation. You do whatever it takes in order to alleviate the pain and not to deal with it. And you default to that kind of behavior. Escapism could be, for example, consumerism, engaging in the behavior of, buying stuff and just feeling good in that moment of acquiring it. And it does not have to be anything big like a house or a car. It can be little things, For example, here in Taiwan, it's very common that you have those game stalls, like small booths where grown-up people, throw in some coins and they try to get those like teddy bears or stuff like that. And I always thought it's super weird. And I believe that this is a form of escapism, because you distract yourself, you get your mind off of, for example, stress at work or your relationship, and you stand there and you just blank out, so to say. Other examples, of course, substance abuse, any sort of. And then the biggest one probably, and getting bigger and bigger, the digital realm. With gaming, with social media, scrolling, getting that dopamine hit, feeling good, forgetting all the stuff around you, forgetting the world that takes place outside of your apartment. And then even, digital relationships even, which you can acquire without all the stress, you can find your digital partner with all the annoyances. So that's also another form. And if you look into it, and I know this example or this analogy is kind of extreme, but I think it follows the same underlying mechanism. It's similar to palliative care. Like if you have a patient that has no hope anymore, or where there's no medical justification, or not justification, but no medical indication that person will get better and will be healthy again, you basically maintain their condition, and you take care of them in the sense that you just want the pain to subside. You just want them to feel better. But the underlying condition is not taken care of because it's impossible. So you just maintain that and hope and wait. And that is very, very similar if you engage in any of the activities, and the list goes on, like the list is way longer than what I just quoted. In this escapism is where we meet the hyperreal. And the hyperreal, we need to define it at first, of course, which loosely is defined, or I define it, or I understand it as a self-sustaining system that no longer refers to or requires any original reality. So again, a self-sustaining system that no longer refers to an original reality or requires any original reality for itself to operate and to exist and to sustain itself. It goes through, and that is of course borrowed, if you haven't noticed yet, off of, or who coined that term, or even created that term, hyperreality, or the hyperreal, is Jean Baudrillard, I think is the correct pronunciation. It's a French philosopher. And he wrote the book Simulacra, Simulation in 1981, and that's kind of like where this is coming from. So it goes through 4 stages. The hyperreal goes through 4 stages. The first one, in order to manifest, the first one is a reflection. Example for a reflection would be, I look into a mirror. It's a reflection. That is a reflection of the real, but it has a very strong reference to the real. You can understand, okay, there's a real thing, that's a reflection, it's a mirror, and that's it. Stage number 1. Stage number 2 would be a representation. If now I hold my phone up and show you a map, and that blue pin of like Google Maps, that blue pin would be me, my location. That would be a representation of me. It looks different. It's of course not me as a person, but it represents where I am, what I am right now. So it still has sort of like a link to my actual life, real location. The third stage would be perversion, or like a alteration, like a pretense of the reality. That would, for example, be Donald Trump giving a speech created by artificial intelligence that looks super real, but it's actually not Donald Trump. And he actually never said those things. So you still have like a small reference to the original, but obviously it's not, well, not obviously, but now in this example, obviously it's not the real thing. And then the 4th stage would be a full replacement of the reality. And Jean Baudrillard calls it the full simulacra, where there is no reference point given anymore to what used to be real. What is real is just a reality, or a hyperreality in itself. If you think that sounds futuristic and dystopian, and it's like, okay, like what is this guy gonna tell us? Like that's just weird. Actually not. Like especially the early stages of the hyperreal date back like thousands of years ago. If you just think of it, cave paintings, for example, is a form of which stage? The representation, like the second one or the third one, depends on the example. You can play that game yourself, where you have something that is, like painted on the wall that is obviously not the real, and it symbolizes something. It carries a meaning, but it alters the meaning. It's not the original. It's a copy. That hyperreal becomes more and more present as we advance technologically. I said that a minute ago. With the digital realm, of course, like everything is sped up like exponentially. We now have the power to engage in this, in the creation of the hyperreal and the replacement of the reality at a speed and detail level and depth that has never been there before. And I think it's still yet the beginning, and there's so much more to come. And it comes at the same time with a promise to give us a better reality at a lower cost. And that is where the danger lies, in my opinion. Because in the past, or up to this point, we grew up with this understanding of better input, higher input equals better and higher outcome. So we incentivized to, work hard, put in the effort and all of that, because we see that strong correlation between input and output. And the hyperreal sort of breaks that relationship, breaks that connection for the first time, because for the first time in history, you can become famous and rich and all of the things that people promise you or the system promises you by going viral on TikTok. You don't have to work. You don't have to go to university, pull a loan, indebt yourself, try hard, work 60 hours a week in order to become like a manager, a CEO, whatever, to then, have a house, family and all that and create that picture perfect life that, capitalism instilled in you. Now it's like, okay, I don't have to be any of those guys. I can just make money and all of that overnight, basically. And another example would be like as I said earlier, like a digital relationship, that you do not have to go through all the annoyances and the responsibilities and all of that, but you have like a AI created maybe at some point. At first it will be hybrid, but then like AI thing that is like your perfect match, and that satisfies you emotionally, physically, and whatever, in combination with like sensory experiences and all of that. It's basically, there's no limit to this whole thing. So yeah, we have that paradigm shift that comes with this hyperreal, with the evolving of the hyperreal. And that brings us to my hypothesis that the expansion of the hyperreal, the hyperreality, is destroying human growth. At first, it stunts growth, and eventually it leads to an absence of human growth entirely, at first on an individual level and then on a collective level. And why I think so is because if you think of it, growth usually, or maybe always, I don't know, let's say usually wants resistance, like you grow through resistance. And let's pull up some examples in physiology. For example, you destroy the muscle, or you challenge the muscle, it gets teared, it grows back, it grows thicker, the structure changes. You plant a tree, you expose that tree to wind, the roots grow stronger, that tree grows stronger. Psychologically, you work through some trauma, you work through some unpleasant things, you end up being mentally stronger. In economics, you have a product that sucks, people don't buy it, you tweak the product, you end up with better sales. So you get the idea. Whenever there is friction in the process and resistance, you punch through it, you find ways, you end up with a stronger result. Now, if you do not have resistance, if you do not have friction, you basically end up with a total lack of this incentivization, because basically now you don't have to work hard, you don't have to do all of those things. And if resistance leads to growth, the flip side would be you take that out of the equation, there's no growth, because like, why would you? And that, in my opinion, leads to two possible outcomes. Result A, and of course there's many, but just to give you two to create a contrast. Result A would be a physical, a cognitive, an emotional decline in the human race, a loss of critical thinking, a loss of identity, a loss of diversity, a cultural loop, because there's no more innovation, basically. Even to the illusion of immortality, because if you have a digital avatar that never dies, that can just be controlled by another being as the receiver, you perceive that as the observer, you perceive that as immortal. And that is dangerous also in the sense of, well, it disconnects you from spiritual growth, because up to this point at least, we fear death. We're curious about death. A lot of philosophy and religion has death, life and death, or with death as part of life, as their core aspect, or one of the most significant aspects that we look into and that we try to understand, and that everything revolves around that. But if you, again, like take that out of the equation, there's basically no need for spiritual growth, and there's no need to even look into any of those things. History would become irrelevant. Everything that happens, all the events would be experienced kind of like a algorithmic news feed that's just fed to you, but it doesn't really have a meaning to you. And speaking of meaning, ultimately, I think it would lead to a meaningless, entirely meaningless existence. The result B, and hopefully A doesn't really pan out that way. And result B would be, that is kind of hopeful, or giving hope to take a counter position, would be a counter movement. Because if you look in history, if you look at history, you see that every big movement has always also created a counter movement. Was like that with the Enlightenment, then Romanticism, you have capitalism, you have communism, you have, something more recent, like globalization and nationalism, or you have LGBTQ people, and you have traditionalists, or however you want to call them. So I think that's just natural that you have both two forces going against each other, and that gives hope in a way. And how that lets me circle back to what we do as satotea, is that being part of that counter, anticipating this development and being part of this counter movement already, by encouraging you to be present in that moment, do hard things, sit down, reflect, contemplate, and learning to not just doing hard things, but actually learning to enjoy doing those hard things, accepting painful experiences, understanding them as part of the journey, so to say, and seeking your personal truth, your individual truth, not an absolute truth that someone outside somewhere tells you or defines as the truth, but your personal truth. And I believe that if the lack of individual growth can be contagious to the collective and create that kind of like dystopian outcome, then on the flip side, transforming yourself into a kinder, virtuous, more loving, more softer, more humble human being is equally powerful or possible then to have an impact on the collective as well, and to strengthen the scenario that I'm laying out right now. And oftentimes, as an ending point, it's not the big things, that we need to focus on, but it's the little things that we can do on our day-to-day basis that make a difference, that help us to shape the world that we live in.